Irma Georgia Thierna Tonali for the Corfu, and Chin the Sure in Arganivera, August Narta Brasta de Runner and Hadida Hood Concreca. On the Scaluzza Tus no for Arnil of Reader, August Arnil Gania Fasta, as got 3 of the Creek no for Eid, 3 Creek Star Dirna and N. Direct to beseech the Lord our actions by the holy inspirations, and carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee, and by thee be happily ended through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Before the leader.
Thank you, Cahill. The order of business is items 1 to 5 on the order paper. Item 1, Public Health Sunbeds Bill 2013, committee in remaining stages, to be taken at 11:45 a.m. and to be adjourned at 1 p.m. if not previously concluded. Item 2, Criminal Justice Forensic Evidence DNA Database System Bill 2013, committee in remaining stages, to be taken at 1 p.m. and to be adjourned at 3 p.m. if not previously concluded. Item 3, Johnstown Castle Agricultural College Amendment Bill 2014, all stages, to be taken at 3 p.m. with the contribution of group spokespersons not to exceed 6 minutes, all other senators not to exceed 4 minutes. Minister will be given 5 minutes to reply to the debate at the second stage. Committee in remaining stages will be taken immediately thereafter. Item 4, private members' business, to be taken at 4:30 p.m. and to conclude no later than 6:30 p.m. Item 5, statements on mother and baby homes, to be taken at 6:30 p.m. and to conclude no later than 7:15 p.m. The contribution of all senators not to exceed 5 minutes each.
Senator McSherry.
Thanks very much. Look, I'd like to propose an amendment to the order of business that the Taoiseach would come to the House this morning to explain to it his extraordinary claims in the Dáil yesterday that he intends to delay the banking inquiry until such time as the government parties have a majority on it. It seems very alarming that the Taoiseach has chosen to tamper with the democratic process in such a way. The Curtin inquiry, which I'm sure some members, or even those newer members, will recall it in the media, did its work in an exemplary fashion, in a non-partisan fashion. The Dirt inquiry into the non-payment of dirt by the banks over the years is another such example where the late Deputy Mitchell and his colleagues did an exemplary job in a non-partisan fashion. So one wonders the necessity to tamper with the political process in such a dictatorial and authoritarian manner. And I think it's important that the Taoiseach, whether it was a case that he dropped the ball with loose language yesterday, or whether it is in fact an underhanded, sinister attempt to manipulate the democratic process. But I think the public are entitled to an explanation to this, and I think that this House is an appropriate forum for that. As a second point, I think that it's important that we get the perspective of the Labour Party on this. And while I know that there is a leadership struggle going on within that party, I think that the public are entitled to know the days to stand over such tampering in the democratic process, and a process that they were party to establishing in terms of the Act, establishing the banking inquiry, and the procedures and rules that govern it. And now that the Taoiseach has loosely intended yesterday, through his comments, to change that process, because he feels, I think his words were, "I don't know what your members would do," which is the profound insinuation that I must have a majority to ensure that the Taoiseach's terms of reference are those that are followed, and not those as set up, as intended under the Act, by the democratically elected Oireachtas. So we feel this is the most serious of matters. It requires the Taoiseach's clear explanation, and I think in parallel the people are also entitled to know whether the Labour Party are party to this dismantling of the democratic process, and whether they stand over the Taoiseach's dictatorial tampering with the democratic system. Thank you.
Senator Bacik.
First, I'd like to just thank the leader for arranging the debate this evening on the mother and baby homes, given the general welcome that I think all of us gave yesterday to the government announcement of the establishment of a Commission of Investigation following the intergovernmental group on scoping exercise that's been carried out at present. Given that we've all welcomed that, I think it's very important that we have that debate this evening. I thank the leader for that. And no doubt, however, this will be just the first of a number of debates we'll have on this, given that there will be clearly a scoping exercise carried out and then a Commission of Investigation. Could I also congratulate Senator Zappone on the passage of her bill through second stage yesterday with government support, and indeed I was delighted and privileged to second the bill, which seeks to end discrimination against persons with intellectual disability in respect of sex offence provisions, and in particular seeks to amend the very crude Section 5 of the 1993 Sexual Offences Act, which all in the Chamber agreed was outdated in its paternalistic approach. So I think that's very welcome to see that bill being brought forward in the Seanad. The Minister Fitzgerald, who is here to take the bill, indicated that she would be incorporating the principles in it into the government's own sex offences bill currently being drafted. So that's hugely important, and it was a good day for the Seanad. And finally, Ciara, could I ask the leader for a debate in due course on Judge Cooke's report into the GSOC bugging allegation? I think it's important we would all have a chance to read and digest that report. It certainly perhaps contradicts what had been assumed to, or presumed in many quarters to have taken place. I know the ICCL have already come out to criticise the report, but I would welcome a debate, a considered debate on the report and on its findings once we've all had a chance to digest those and to read in some detail. I see Judge Cooke in particular has made findings in respect of some of the conclusions that were jumped to about technical issues around the sort of the presence of appeared at first sight to be bugging, but clearly he's made very different findings on that. So I think we should have a debate on that in due course. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Barrett.
Want to welcome the improvements in the state examinations in mathematics this year, and the relief that must have caused over 100,000 people sitting those examinations. You may recall, Ciara, that last year on an adjournment motion that the Minister, Minister Quinn, is an architect, and Senator Clune is an engineer, and the help we had on these benches from the Mathematics Teachers Association, we pointed out very many mistakes in the mathematics paper, and the Minister undertook to look into it, and I gather that the papers were sat by experts, and, if you like, the mistakes were weeded out. And I think it was an illustration for young people of how valuable the Senate was on that particular occasion, and it's made life, I think, a lot happier for those sitting public examinations this year. And credit is due to the Minister and to the State Examinations Commission, and to the role that the Senate played in making sure that those problems, which caused a lot of distress this time last year, did not occur in 2014.
Senator Sheehan.
I would ask the leader that as soon as as soon as the reshuffle is over and there's Minister Hayes is replaced, that his replacement would come to the House, that we have a debate on the whole procurement procedures that are going on at present. We are told of the savings that are being made through this new drive in procurement, but I'm afraid I'm seeing the other side of it, where jobs are being lost, and I don't know if real savings are being made, and I think we need a full, wholesome debate on that. Prior to Irish Water being set up, I was led to believe that contracts would be set out in bundles of 2,000 connections, whereby the small man or the small operator excuse me, but the small operator would be able to tender and win contracts like that. But unfortunately, when Irish Water took over, the man with the green van came in and took up the whole lot, Murphy's. And what they're doing now is subcontracting down along the line to people that should have these contracts. And they are leaving on a daily basis. Hence, the installation of water meters is way behind. That is not my issue, but this is, as we call it, an unintended consequence of this procurement process, that if it was left in bundles of 2,000 installations, per contract, we would have the small operator who would be able to tender for that. And the same is actually happening presently with Irish Rail, whereby if one doesn't have a turnover in excess of 400,000 per annum, one cannot tender for the work. And you know, it's putting the small operator out of business, and I believe we need a full, wholesome debate on the whole procurement procedure, and I would ask the leader for that as soon as possible.
Senator Donovan.
I'd like to second Senator McSharry's proposal for the amendment to the order of business. I primarily stand, to ask the leader to have an urgent debate here on the whole system of law and order and justice, and that the new minister should come before this House as soon as is practicable, certainly before the summer recess. And I say that in light of the Cooke report, and in light of the fact that GSOC, with or without the Cooke report, seems to have been structurally damaged, and is structurally damaged in my view. The morale of the Gardaí is at a very low ebb. The relationship that existed, and I still think exists between the Department of Justice and GSOC leaves a lot to be desired. The whistleblowers had no faith on GSOC. The former minister treated them with disdain. And when you're out and about, as I was during the recent local elections, the European elections, one of the most searching questions that was put to me on the ground is the whole system of justice, I suppose to quote Minister Radker, is not fit for purpose. This is a very, very serious issue. The new minister, I don't want to be harsh, she's a tough task ahead, but I think she owes a duty to this House. This was her political crash, so to speak, in the last Oireachtas. And I think she should come into this House and indicate to us her plan to restore the morale of the Gardaí, which in my view is a very low ebb. Secondly, how does she intend, and what are her plans to totally reform or restructure the Department of Justice, which is like a dinosaurus. It's old-fashioned, it's creaking, it needs reform, and that's been indicated. And thirdly, that GSOC itself, which the whistleblowers had no faith in, must be totally reformed and restructured so that the public can have confidence in it. And this debate, and this is the appropriate chamber to have this debate, and if there isn't progress in this, leader, I will say in the next week or two I'll be raising this by way of amendment to the order of business. I'm not going to do it today because I want the minister to give her a chance, but certainly before this House goes into recess in a few weeks' time, I think the minister should come in and have a fulsome debate on the whole area of law and order and what are our plans to restore confidence in the Gardaí, to restore confidence in GSOC, and to restore any confidence that's left on the Department of Justice, or else reform it, because they're sadly lacking. And the public at large out there have lost belief on these important, I suppose, legs of the department and the minister and the Gardaí and GSOC, and that has to be restored as a matter of great urgency.
Senator Hayden.
Thank you very much, Caherlock. Could I welcome the launch today of the PRTB ESRI National Rent Index. It's a valuable source of information as to what's happening in the rental market in this country. And what it shows, again, is that rents in Dublin increased by 8.4% for the first 3 months of this year, and that the average rent in Dublin is twice as much as it is in the rest of the country. 637 outside of Dublin and 1,227 in Dublin. Unfortunately, Threshold, for example, declares that rent increases are actually higher than that. They're seeing clients coming in with 20, 30 and 40% rent increases. And the declared rents that are being put on the PRTB ESRI index unfortunately don't reflect the practice of topping up, in other words, where tenants make payments under the counter, so to speak, so that the declared rents do not actually equal to the real rents that are being charged. And this has a number of repercussions, not least on the revenue of what's brought in terms of tax. Could I ask the leader for a debate on rent control, Caherlock, and in particular on what needs to be done legislatively to bring about better security of tenure for people who are living in the rented sector. There's no doubt that the number of people living in rented housing in Ireland today has more than doubled. 1 in 5 families now nationally are living in private rented housing, and in fact 1 in 3 in Dublin and even higher in Galway. So I think this is a matter of some urgency given the severity of the issue of rent increases.
Senator Seanad.
I want to support the amendment to the Order of Business which has been tabled. I think it's farcical at this stage that we're still in a situation where the Seanad is holding up the banking inquiry because of a mistake that was made by the government. And the government should just put their hands up and accept that they made a mistake, that their people didn't turn up for a meeting that they should have turned up to, and that the government are now seeking to overturn a democratic decision of a committee of the Houses of the Oireachtas, and in so doing are holding up an important inquiry into the banking crisis that we had in this state. The situation that we have at the moment in relation to the holding up of that inquiry has nothing to do with Fianna Fáil, has nothing to do with the independents, has nothing to do with Sinn Féin, and it's the clear responsibility of the two government parties over there who made a mess of this themselves. And I think the Taoiseach yesterday let the cat out of the bag when he said this was about ensuring the government has a majority. That was never meant to be the intention of the banking inquiry. And what he did was let the cat out of the bag and has created an even bigger hole now for the government. So I would support the amendment to the Order of Business that the Taoiseach would come in and account for himself and account for what he said, because if we end up with a partisan banking inquiry, it is not going to have the confidence and the support of the people outside this chamber. I would argue that the vast majority of citizens are not interested in which groupings have a majority on the inquiry. They want the politicians to get down to the business of doing the work of the inquiry itself, and that should happen as quickly as possible. So maybe now the leader can take the opportunity this morning to outline to us what is happening, why is this still being held up, and is he going to proceed? And the final point I'll make on this is that it's a bit ironic that these two committees which had messed up are one of the few committees that Sinn Féin is not represented on. In fact, we were excluded from the Committee on Selection, and we were excluded from the CPP because of rules made up by government parties in relation to group sizes and so on. So this is entirely your own making, Leader, and the making of your own members. Sort it out as quickly as possible, and let's get the banking inquiry up and running, which is in all of our interests.
Senator Keane.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I again want to raise rent prices, rent control, but it is in the context of good news story in that a surge in the number of new companies setting up, particularly in Dublin, has led to a shortage of office space. Now, this is a good news story because obviously new companies mean more jobs and as well more construction jobs. And 4,438 new companies set up in the first quarter of this year. That's a 21% increase on the past 5 years. 1/5 of them chose to locate in Dublin 1, 2 or 4. And obviously the Silicon Docks, Tech Valley of the Dublin area, or the Dublin 1 area in particular, is. But we have to be careful that we don't create, or there isn't a rent bubble created. It's beginning to happen because obviously shortage of space in the Dublin 1, 2 and 4 area can. And there are good there are other places around Dublin like Tala and City West and the Grange Castle area where there are spaces. And I would ask for a debate in the Chamber to ensure that we get a balance between supply and demand and ensure that sustainable development, particularly Aideen was talking about housing in general. I'm asking for a debate on the business sector because the long-term survival of a new business startup, if it is a thing that there is a rent bubble, as it happened before in the city centre, that can lead to companies having to move on and move out and indeed disband. So we don't want that to happen. A recent report from Savins has demonstrated that 57,000 square metres of office lettings signed in the first 3 months. That is a 32% increase on what we had last year. So it's good news, but on the other hand, we have to be careful that it's done properly, and we have to ensure that it is the businesses are enticed and shown. And I'm sure, between IDA and Enterprise Ireland or whatever, and the local authorities and the new LEOs that set up, that is a fair demand or a fair supply right around the city. Thank you very much indeed.
Senator Mary Morden.
Thank you, Caherlick. Caherlick, since I've entered the Seanad, there's been one topic that I have raised consistently, indeed even on a weekly basis, and that is the issue of symphysiotomy. It seems to me every couple of weeks I've been asking for the last 3 years, but the report and looking for closure on this for the many women that have been affected. Caherlick, I rise today to express my disappointment, despair even, that we're still awaiting closure for the women affected by this barbaric act. I'm repeatedly told, and I understand, that Judge Murphy's recommendations have been with the government since March. We're still awaiting the publication of the Walsh report, and we're just told that it's imminent. It's imminent. I would ask that the leader please would check this out, and I would ask for the immediate publication of both Judge Murphy's recommendations and the Walsh report. Caherlick, yesterday I met with RTE's head of sport in RTE studios in Donnybrook to hand over a petition that I started just over a week ago, urging RTE to provide live coverage of the Special Olympic national finals, which will be held in Limerick this weekend. These games, as I've said all week, will showcase what's best about our country. It's a good news story, and I lament the fact that even though I am delighted with the outcome of the petition and that we have secured additional coverage on both television and radio, that there will not be any live coverage. I think it raises the whole question of equality, and again I would ask and call on the leader to please organise an urgent debate on equality in our broadcasting, because it's an issue that I've brought up before following the Paralympic Games last year, and also about Winter Special Olympics, which I felt deserved a lot more coverage than it got from our national broadcaster. So I would appreciate if we could have a debate on the matter. Thank you.
As ever, I recognise the consummate actor which Senator McSherry is. I mean, he appeared to speak this morning in rather measured tones, which are much at variance, I would suggest, with some of his more recent utterances in the House. But anyway, that's an attribute that he's acquired from years of experience on stage, which I acknowledge. But look, nobody wants to have a row about this matter. But let's recognise it was clearly understood that the two Shanadori to sit on this committee, where one would come from this side of the House and one would come from that side of the House. And I'm not complaining about anything, but there was rather short notice as well of the meeting to which you referred. I mean, I think I got the notice about 12 o'clock that day, and the meeting was at 7 o'clock. As I say, I'm not complaining. I don't want to revisit it. I'm sure matters will proceed satisfactorily. I don't even know that you were quoting properly or accurately that reasonable man, the Taoiseach. And I would suggest equally that speed is no longer of the essence. It wasn't. This is something we've needed for years, you could say. But as we know, given our constitutional position and the rights enshrined therein, because matters were proceeding in other quarters, in the courts namely, this matter couldn't be dealt with. So I think, look, as we'd say at home in my part of the country, will you take it easy, rest easy, and things will satisfactorily resolve themselves in due course.
Mary White.
I believe it is timely and appropriate that the senators of this House extend our good wishes for a successful outcome to the discussions on the future of Boston Law in Waterford, taking place this week in Dublin under the auspices of the Labour Relations Commission. Our esteemed leader of the Seanad, Senator Maurice Cummins, is more conscious of any of us of the implications of these discussions for the 1,100 employees and the economy of his home city of Waterford. The indications are very encouraging that the key parties, unions and management have entered these discussions in a spirit of good faith. The mother company of Bosch & Lone, Valiant, a Canadian company, is looking to lay off 200 people and to look for a 20% 10% reduction in salaries of the remaining people. We would welcome, I want us to send a message to the people, the Senate here, us all together, to send a message to the good wishes to the people who are taking part in these discussions, and saying that we would welcome in particular the written assurance to the employees of the CEO, Michael Pearson, that the company was committed to maintaining its presence in the city, provided it got the savings needed. It's very interesting that 30 years ago, Travanel in Castlebar was threatened of closure. I remember being very involved in that myself. And 700 people were threatened to lose their job in Castlebar. But there was magnificent teamwork between the local people, the staff and the chief executive of Travanel at the time, and they worked relentlessly for about 6 months to save Travanel, and which they did. Now, I am hoping that this will happen in Waterford. But there's a caveat over this, because what's happened simultaneously at the moment, that the parent company of Bosch and Long are looking for, they want to take over Allergan, mind you, in Mayo. Allergan is the largest manufacturer of Botox in the world, and there are 900 people there. So we will all be watching very carefully of the good faith of the owners of Allergan, who I said have 900 employees in Westport, and have made 3 bids already. Valiant have made 3 bids already to take over Allergan. Now, and secondly, a very important point, our condemnation of the New York Senator Charles Schumer, who has putting pressure on Valiant to move the Waterford company and all the jobs in Waterford to Rochester in New York. So this is a very, very serious issue going on in our country today. There's 2 companies here now, Bosch and Lomb and Waterford. The devastation that will happen in Waterford if that company, if there isn't a successful outcome, and also that we as a nation have to resist any takeover of Allergan by Valiant.
Senator Mullins.
Thanks, I just want to join with senators who have welcomed the publication yesterday of the Cooke report. I think we're all greatly relieved that there was no concrete evidence that there was surveillance of their offices, and indeed that the Gardaí were in any way involved in illegal activity. I think it would now be very important that GSOC themselves would urgently finalise their investigation as to how information was leaked to the Sunday Times, which started this whole controversy in the first place. So I would call on GSOC to finalise that report as a matter of urgency. There's a story in this morning's Independent that the Houses of the Oireachtas Commission to pay the revenue of 330,000 in underpayment of taxes. I think it would be important that the Houses of the Oireachtas Commission would explain how this matter has arisen. I think there's great public disquiet and interest in this particular story, so I think it would be only appropriate that the members of this House would hear from the Commission as to what the circumstances were that necessitated this significant payment to the revenue. Thank you.
Senator Mooney, or sorry, Senator O'Flaherty.
Agus Contreatas an fuiche fatá in Seanad Mullins, Madge le Tourist Cooke Venus in the Rochester to imagine an ICC Augustine. I think the relief being shown by Senator Mullins in relation to the Cooke report is certainly isn't shared by a number of other spokespersons who have spoken out this morning on the Cooke report. And I note that one of the main points of the Cooke report says that it is impossible to categorically rule out all possibility of covert surveillance in the 3 threats identified by Verimus, and Cooke also queries whether GSOC's remit should be confined to the investigation of matters which are attributable only to the commission of offences by members of the Garda, or should be considered desirable as a matter of legislative policy that the power be exercisable in circumstances where the offence is attributable to third parties outside the force. And there's a very strong statement this morning, I note, from the Irish Council for Civil Liberties on this issue, and they feel that this is an exercise in smoke and mirrors. They've said that Judge Cooke was constrained by the terms of reference accorded to him by government, that Judge Cooke has found precisely what it seems to have been preordained, that he would find that it is impossible to rule out categorically all possibility of covert surveillance. And he also says that what's striking is that the judge appears to have made absolutely no independent investigative attempt to establish objectively whether or not surveillance of GSOC by Garda Síochána had been sought or authorised. It seems that not a single member of Garda Síochána or the Defence Forces was interviewed. No examination of the records kept of the use of surveillance equipment by police or military intelligence services took place, nor were the oversight activities of the designated judges under the relevant legislation subject to any form of review. So I think there are still very serious questions that we need to address. I would call on the leader to possibly facilitate a debate on the Cooke report as soon as possible, because we do want to make sure that we have got to the bottom of this matter. And if there was, instead of a sense of relief, I think what we should be looking for is that is there any chance whatsoever that covert surveillance is happening to any of the arms of our justice system? Because if there is, we need to make sure that that isn't happening and it's stopped.
Senator Noon.
Look, I'd like to support Senator Mullins in his call for a statement or an explanation from the Oireachtas Commission. €330,000 is a significant, very significant sum for us to have had to pay from these houses, and I think this House would be a suitable venue to investigate this matter, which is very serious as far as I'm concerned. I wanted to briefly raise an issue which relates to an issue I raised last week on childhood obesity and sugar. And on the face of it, it seems like a frivolous issue, but I would propose some sort of regulation in the area of ice cream vans. And it's difficult to raise this and say that without actually bringing a smile to your face. But I was contacted by numerous parents after an issue I raised last week was in the media. And one in particular from Wexford told me that there's an ice cream van that visits her estate up to 4 or 5 times a day. And that, you know, it's leading to loads of rows between her and her children, in particular one child, you know, as to whether or not, you know, she should allow that child to have either ice cream, slushy drinks, chewing gums. You know, as I talk about it, it does seem frivolous on the face of it, but it relates to an issue of pester power, and certain shops have introduced, you know, I suppose an aid to assist parents in that they don't have the same level of confectionery near tills, which I think it helps parents deal with this pester power. The reality is the children are, you know, very interested in sugar and very addicted to it in lots of instances. And, you know, it's not that I'm anti-ice cream, but the persistent use of chimes in public streets and in estates is an aggressive form of selling, and it wouldn't be countenanced in any other industry. And while there's no regulation of this area in Ireland, in the UK it's a different story, and they have actually, you know, brought about measures to regulate this area. So, I mean, pester power is something that we need to help parents with, and if it's something that we could regulate to some degree, at least in this country, it would be very welcome in an effort to reduce childhood obesity. Thank you.
Senator Noon's comments about ice cream. In any diet, I understand that the first no-no is ice cream. That's the first one before anything else. I just want to support Senator McSharry's amendment and to say that I'm not at all reassured by Senator Coughlin's comments. It seems like a little bit of a wolf in sheep's clothing to talk about taking it easy. There is nothing easy about what has happened over the last while. The simple facts are that a committee of selection of this House nominated 2 people, and the Taoiseach yesterday, by his intervention, I would suggest, has now undermined the entire credibility of the banking inquiry by saying that in order to attain terms of reference that he needs a government majority. Senator Barrett, subsequent to that, put it on the record of this House that he is not anti-government. And I would have thought that a banking inquiry in which all of the participating parties have embraced the concept of a banking inquiry will be about seeking the truth rather than about scoring political points. At least that's what I would have hoped. But I'm afraid that the comments of the Taoiseach yesterday in the other House has now completely undermined that, and I think it has undermined it in the public mind as well. Whereas that there is a genuine desire to get to the bottom of the banking inquiry, I think it has now been totally undermined, and for that reason I would support Senator McSharry's call. The Taoiseach should come to this House, because it's this House that in a sense is holding things up, because the government will not accept the democratic will of a committee of selection.
Senator Burke.
Thank you very much, Cahill. I too would like to join in welcoming the publication of the Cooke report. I think it was done in a very expeditious manner, and I think the terms of reference, when given to John Cooke, clearly set out what his role was. And I don't recollect any criticism being put forward at the time of the terms of reference. And the report is about establishing and clearing the air on issues that were made and brought to the public domain. And I think his brought clarification, which was required. Could I just raise one other issue, Cahill, and that's an issue that I raised about 18 months ago, and it's in relation to the taxation of costs in the High Court, where we have 2 taxing masters in place. And we have a problem in that there is undue delay in getting decisions in the taxation of costs, and as a result, a large number of people who are involved in cases in the High Court are not being paid. And I'm talking about not being paid within a 3-year time period from the time the case is finished. And I think it's time, and I raised this 18 months ago, I put down in the German debate calling for the appointment of a 3rd taxi master. And it is the solution to the problem on the basis that it is cost neutral. Because anyone who wants to tax costs in the High Court has to pay a fee in to the Office of the High Court to have the cost taxed. So it's cost neutral. And I would request that the leader would bring this matter to the attention of the Minister for Justice, and that if necessary we have a debate here on the matter, because there's a lot of people who have not recovered the costs that they've incurred, who have not recovered the fees that they've incurred in doing work and in presenting evidence in the High Court, and I think it's time that the issue is resolved. And also, can I finally say, my concern, and as to why I'm raising it this morning, is because a number of people now have decided to take judicial review proceedings in relation to the delay, and they've decided to take the matter back into the High Court for an adjudication. And I think it's time now for the Minister for Justice to act, and I'd ask that the leader would bring this matter to our attention, and if necessary have a debate here in this House on the matter. Thank you.
Senator Quinn.
Thank you, Gaelic. The problem with pyrite has cropped up again, and a number of houses have had to be destroyed or knocked down in Drogheda and elsewhere. And I just wonder whether the building regulations are being enforced to the extent that this is now continuing to continue as a problem. So I just like to think that something is being done there, and my question really to you, Leader, is could you confirm that there are building regulations that actually will stop this? Because the pyrite isn't the fault of the builder, it's the fault of the supplier. I don't think it had a cost to the state. To the best of my knowledge, the supplier is probably insured, and so it's the insurance company pays for it on that basis. But I think there is a need for building regulations to insist that we avoid this pyrite or anything like pyrite in the future. Just one other point. There's been a lot in the papers in recent days about the cost of medicine. May I remind the House that in Japan, no, it's China, the system is that the doctor gets paid for keeping you well. So as long as you're well, he gets paid. It's only he doesn't get paid when he has to attend you and look after you on that basis. Now, I think that's a smashing way of running a country and running a medical service. And I just don't know that it's going to get serious attention here, but it would seem to me to be an ideal way that the doctor gets paid if you're well, he doesn't get paid if he has to attend you.
Senator Brennan.
Just something small. I'd like to support the call this morning by my colleague Senator Sheehan on the question of procurement procedures by all departments, OPW, HSE or whatever. An urgent debate required in this House as soon as possible. I know of small companies who cannot get on the procurement lists for whatever reasons, I don't know. And while I'm on my feet, Cahill, I'd just like to, and I don't know who's responsible for the grass cutting around Leinster House or the maintenance of our gardens. We haven't that much greenery. But I just happened to be looking at it yesterday morning and this morning. For our Parliament, the standard is absolutely appalling. Unless the grass can be cut by a sit-on lawnmower and the flower beds maintained from a sit-on lawnmower, it just does not happen. There's no such thing as edging our grass, cutting our grassed areas. I think it must be looked at. It's our Parliament. We had a Prime Minister from Mozambique came in the same entrance as I came in myself this morning. It's absolutely appalling. Whether we do it ourselves or whether it's on a procurement basis or handed out to outsiders, it's something I believe that should be.
If we take up the superintendent of the Board of Works.
Take it up with the
Superintendent of the House.
I shouldn't raise it here with my colleagues that are passing it every day of the week.
It's not a matter for the other business.
Should I not?
It's not a matter for the other business, Senator. You can take it up with the superintendent. The leader?
Get it.
Thank you, Catherine. I don't propose to accept the amendment to the order of business tabled by Senator McSharry. Senator Bacik in relation to, and indeed several other senators in relation to the Judge Cooke's report on GSOC and calling for a debate. And we'll certainly try and have a debate on that. The government accepts in full the findings and the conclusions of the report, and the Minister says that the report will inform legislative changes relating to GSOC. Senator Barrett on the improvements in the state exams in mathematics, and certainly we had a role to play in it in the debate last year after the exams, and I think everybody are gratified that the mistakes of the past have been rectified in this regard. Senator Sheehan and Senator Brennan in relation to procurement procedures and the procurement process and the need to cater for small operators. And as the Senator has mentioned, when we have a junior minister in place in that department, we'll certainly invite him in, he or she in to deal with that matter. Senator Donovan on the question of law and order and asking the Minister to come into the House, and I'm sure that the Minister will be quite willing to come into the House. The Minister is conducting a full review of her department at the present time, and I think this is to be welcomed by everybody. And in relation to the Gardaí, I think we've all welcomed that the recruitment to the Gardaí has commenced again, but I'd certainly ask the Minister to come in and debate the issue, but I think she would want to wait until there is a full review of her department which is taking place. Senator Hayden in relation to the PRTB and the SRI rent indexation and calling for a debate on rent control. I know last week we had a debate on rent supplement, but I will ask Minister O'Sullivan. I've asked her on numerous occasions to come in relation to housing, and I realise that she is very busy, but I'll continue to ask her to come into the House to debate the issue of rent control and indeed housing matters. Senator Cullinan, I thank the Senator for his advice on that matter. Senator Keane, in relation to the shortage of office space in Dublin, in some parts of Dublin, calling for a fair supply around the city, and whilst agreeing with her that we should have a fair supply, there are many office spaces available in the regions, I'm sure, for people to set up business as well, and should be encouraged to go into the regions as well to provide much needed employment. Senator Morton has raised the question of symphysiotomy and need to publish the Welsh report. I honestly don't know. There is a need for closure. I don't know why this Welsh report hasn't been published as yet. As she stated, the word we're getting back is that it's imminent, but that's going back a long number of months at this stage. I commend Senator Moran also on her efforts in relation to Special Olympics and the need for additional coverage. And whilst there is additional coverage, there's no live coverage. But I would compliment the Senator on her efforts in this regard in getting additional coverage for Special Olympics, which is such a wonderful event. Senator Mary White, in relation to Bacik Lom, and I'd like to join with her, and I'm sure we all would, in wishing the unions and the management well in their negotiations. Senator Mullins and Clarty on the Cooke report, and indeed Senator Burke, and Senator Noon on the question of obesity, which she's raised in the House on several occasions, and the need for greater regulation in the instance which she mentioned. Senator Burke on the taxation of costs in the High Court and urging that the Minister would appoint a third taxing master to end the long delays there, and I'll certainly bring that matter to the attention of the Minister, and I'm sure he's done so himself also. Senator Quinn will find out for you in relation to pyrite. The problem has raised its head again in Drogheda, as we know, whether the building regulations apply to that, and I'd certainly check, but I would hope that they would, Senator. In relation to doctors getting paid for patients they keep well, I don't know whether that will work here or not there, but good concept. Senator Brennan also on procurement, which I've dealt with. Thank you.
Senator Mark McSherry has moved an amendment to the order of business that a debate with the Taoiseach to explain his stated intentions to delay the holding of the banking inquiry until the government members constitute majority on the committee of inquiry will be taken today. Is the amendment being pressed?
Yes.
The question is that the amendment be made. Those in favour say aye. Those against say nil. The question is defeated. Vote all.